Welcome back. In this demonstration, I'm going to start my relief sculpture for our Egyptian tile project. We already talked about using a line and using a line to outline all the drawing parts of your design. We talked about as we were going to be using this line, we're creating a shape. I'm using this two-dimensional surface to make shapes here, adding these shapes all together and making the shapes into that image. Now what we're doing is we are going to start creating the form of our relief sculpture. So form is when you make three-dimensional shapes. So this already is a form as it's a three-dimensional object. But we're going to be doing relief carving or relief sculpture. So relief sculpture is when you take a flat surface like this one, like a tile or stone or something, and you start to remove material from the image in order to make the image appear. So I've already got this image here and I'm going to start removing the material around it. Now as I start removing that, there's a couple things I want you to be thinking about. There's two kinds of relief sculpture, okay? One is called positive relief and one is called negative relief. So here's our definitions that we're going to be using. Negative relief sculpture is removing the material from the background so the image is raised up. So if I'm looking at this image here, this area behind the tree is what I would consider the background. It's like a negative shape. It's the empty shape between the tree and the hammer and the ground. To remove that, if we like made a cross section of our tile, I would be removing this clay here that used to be here to create a negatively shaped image, like a concave part. Okay? Positive relief sculpture is when you start removing material from the image itself and you leave the background untouched. So if I left this background untouched and I started carving this tree down to make the tree formed, then that would be a positive sculpture. Okay, so like pretend this is the sun. I carve away the area to make the sun stand up. Here I leave the background and carve the sun down so the sun looks rounded, but it's like carved into the image. So that's the difference between positive and negative relief sculpture. Okay. The next piece that I wanted to talk about was your requirements for the assignment. So with your negative relief sculpture, which is what we're going to be doing, negative relief sculpture, you're going to have a high, middle, and a low area. So let's say the highest part here is my tree. It's overlapped on top of my Zen circle. Then I've got the middle level, which would be maybe the Zen circle area. And then the lowest level, which might be the hammers here. And then maybe I'll even have a lowest level, which is like the background. If you can have more than 3 levels, that'd be great. But the minimum is going to be 3 levels: low, middle, and high. All right? Now, some of you might run into a problem where you've got the need for additive sculpture. So subtractive sculpture, we've already kind of talked about. It's the negative. It's like carving away the material. You're taking material out of the picture. Like if I want to remove this background, I take it out. I'm doing subtractive sculpture. You might have to do a little additive sculpture. For example, like these little dots up here. Maybe I want to take a little ball of clay and stick it onto the top. Maybe I've got some design on this ground, and instead of like carving little blades of grass or something, it's easier to roll some little lines and then add them on top. So additive sculpture is whenever you're adding material, and subtractive sculpture is whenever you are taking away material. And our last concept or idea that I'd like to hit on before we start is modeling. Modeling is whenever you're sculpting the clay or some other thing. You're blending or bending the areas together, you're shaping them, moving the clay, adjusting the material to make the image look correct. So like let's say this trunk area, when I get done carving away the background, it's going to be very blocky and square. Then I'm going to take my tools and I'm going to like model the clay and bring it down. Okay, so in this session I wanted to review all of those terms, and then I want to get started on doing the designing here. Okay, so I'm going to remove this and talk about our 3 tools. We've got 3 tools here. We've got our relief sculpture tool. This tool here is just a simple paper clip like this. It's been opened up, kind of like what we used on our last assignment to trace the clay, but I've taped it together onto a handle so it's a little bit easier to maneuver. Then, and as you can tell, I love popsicle sticks. This one is a pointy popsicle stick that I've carved to a point so that you can kind of get a point into little areas that you need to, or it's got the rounded area to smooth rounded pieces out. This one has a flat edge, so you can like hold it like a pencil and still get this flat edge and scrape things away. This one has two corners to it, so you can hold it like straight up and down and get two areas like in the corners nice and square if you want to. So those are our tools that we'll have out. We'll have some other tools, but I don't want to talk about all those tools because they're not as important. Okay, so I'm going to leave this tree being my highest level. Okay, it's going to be my high level. This background is going to be my lowest level, and the other parts here are going to be in the middle somewhere. Okay, I just wrote on there to kind of give you an idea of where we're going. So I'm going to start to carve some away. I'm going to just take my tool and press it into the surface, and I'm just going to scoop this like a chunk of ice cream. I'm going to scoop it out, and I'm going to just put it on the side. So all this material that you have as you work, you can put it on the side, and we will do what's called recycling. We'll put it in a bin. I'll make it back into clay so it's not too dried out, and we'll make it back into clay so that I can use it on a different assignment, okay, rather than throwing it away. Now, as you see, I'm just kind of taking one chunk at a time, kind of going carefully and slowly through my image, and I'm following the lines that are already there and like kind of carving away shapes. So I'm thinking shapes to myself, like there's the shape of my background. Now I've got some of that area carved out. I can take my flat popsicle stick and I can smooth that layer down so it's all kind of the same level. You don't have to do this right away. I'm just kind of showing you as a technique building. Okay, and I can take this smooth area here and kind of just smooth it all to the same level. All right. Now, that maybe should be my lowest level. Okay, depending on what I've got in the rest of my picture, I might have to adjust that later. But that's kind of my first step in the relief carving. I've carved away the background shape, and later I'm going to model the higher levels to make it to make those shapes come out. Now, if I flip this tile up for you, you don't have a lot of room to work. You've only got the thickness of this tile. If you go down too far, you're going to poke all the way through your tile and you'll have a hole. So then you're going to have to add more back in. So try not to start with holes in your picture. So I'm going to just carve a couple more pieces away here. Now, if I pop this picture back in, I'm going to spend the next few minutes here carving away the background behind the hammers, and I'm going to carve away the background behind this tree. The ground area, I'm going to try to have that up just a little bit. So I'm going to just start carving this area away. Notice how I just hold it in my hands as I go, and then I kind of roll it into a ball with my hand as I'm working to kind of keep it from all piling up on the table. See right there, I just made a little mistake because my handle is supposed to be right there, but I didn't do a very good job tracing it. Now, for everybody, I want you to leave your border be the highest part of your image, because having a border there is going to help our clay to be solid at the edges. It's going to help us from having our images cracking when I fire them in the kiln. So you want to make sure that you've got a border. That's why I designed this project to have a border, and I told you it must have a border, because if you don't have a border, I've found in the past that if I had kids who didn't have a border and they carved it like all the way down at the edge, their clay would often crack and break. And when I was firing it in the kiln, that the kiln would actually like dry that area out too quickly, and there wasn't enough stability in that area, so the clay would often crack and like create these S curves, which is not nice once you've worked so hard on your image creating and your clay carving that then you come and your thing is broken. So those are ways that I'm trying to preemptively have those problems not happen. So here you can see how I'm just kind of like cutting the clay, and then I'm scooping it out like ice cream. That's one way to do this. And the other way is to kind of pull and go down and kind of carve it up like that, and then pop it back into your hand. Okay. And as you start doing this relief sculpture, removing your background, some of you may be able to go quicker. Some of these maybe you'll have less background, some people, and so it's all going to really depend on what your image is like and how much detail you're going to have. The beginning stages of this, you're going to have is going to go a little quicker because you're kind of like roughly removing this material, and then later when we get into the modeling of it, you're going to spend a little bit more time and like careful consideration to how you model. So I would say if I'm taking down my deepest background, this area up here is actually deeper than this first area I dug away. So you're gonna come into a thing of like needing to experiment, like how much can I get away with? What do I really want it to look like? How deep do I want it to be? How many levels do I want this to have? Like if you were careful, you could probably have like 6 or 7 levels of height to your image or depth to your image. Whereas if you were less careful, maybe you just want to have like 3, the minimum. It's gonna kind of self-level for you what you are able to do. I'm going to try to get at least 4 just so I can show you that that's possible, and give you a feeling of challenge, whereas the minimum would be 3 levels. Okay, so I'm going to stop the video there. I think you've got pretty much a good idea of what your goal is. You are carving down your lowest level first, so that gives you a border for the other 3 levels. You are doing subtractive sculpture, taking away, and you are doing negative relief sculpture where you're starting to remove the background first. So all those things together, by the end of this first session, you should have your background of your tile carved away, and the other places that are going to be the middle and the high part still intact, so you can model those and carve them down a little bit more in our next session.